Okay, so Richard from Brewing, we're just now going to deal a little bit more with making beer. We've shown you about the sterilisation, we've talked about temperature. So our bucket is now sterile and lovely and clean and ready to go. So the first thing we have to do is we have to take our malt, which is really quite thick, and we need to stand this in some hot water. And it takes about 20 minutes. So I've got a sink here full of water. I'm just going to put that liquid malt in there. This is going to help us when we come to pour it. So that's going to go in there. If you do that at the same time you start the sterilisation, they'll both be ready at about the same time. Okay. So while that's working, we're going to look at the beer kit that we're making, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. With the Beerworks kits, you get them in pouches, and with them you've got a top quality malt. There's no extra sugar to add. Everything that you need is in all these kits, absolutely everything. So the only thing that you have to add is water. We're looking at the malt, and as I say, in 15 minutes we're going to be ready to start using that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to break off for a few minutes while we wait for that malt to soften up, and then we'll come back to you. Right, so there are other types of beer kits available. You've got the single can, you've got the double can arrangement, all treated in the same way. You need to stand them in water to get that malt softened. So our pouch is now, as you can feel, it's wet and it's actually quite warm. I'm now just going to cut across the top. And we're going to pour this into our bucket. In she goes. Look at that. Oh wow, the smell is just gorgeous. Oh. So we're just pouring all that malt in. In she goes, and I want to make sure I don't leave any behind. So what I tend to do is I will just fold it over like that and squeeze down the bag. And out she comes. And it's really, as I say, quite thick, this malt. So what they do is they take 23 litres of liquid malt, which they've used the grain and they've done the boil from, and they extract the water element, and this is what we end up with, this concentrated malt extract. And as I say, all this is in the brew. Most of the kits have at least 3 kilos, which is obviously enough to give it a really super taste. And that's all gone in there like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open this up, the malt there, and I'm going to run some hot water through. But it's a bit messy, so I'm not going to do it on camera. So I'll have to come back in a minute. Right, so I've added all the malt. There's nothing left in the actual foil bag or in the can if we were using cans. All the malt is now in the base of this bucket, and what we're going to do is we're going to add some hot water to it to help just dissolve that malt. So I'm going to run it through into a jug. I'm going to add 3 to 5 litres of hot water just to help me. And that will then mean that we can dissolve it and stir it. Now with some of the kits, you might well have, some of the Beerworks, the stronger ones will actually have some extra things in there as well. So if you're getting those, they need to go in at the start. This one which we're doing is called Uncle Teddy's, and it's based very much on the Timothy Taylor's Landlord, which is one of my personal favourite beer kits, and I've very much modelled it on that. So I think you'd be absolutely delighted with this one. It's really quite nice and hoppy as well. So as I say, I'm adding about 5 litres of hot water. That goes in there. Now remember, with your water, to make sure that if you have a storage tank, do not use your hot water from there. There are bugs in those storage tanks. If you've got a combi boiler, great. If you've got the storage tank, then boil your water. Water is obviously the biggest ingredient, and that's the thing which is going to make most difference to the taste. 95% of people will use ordinary tap water when they're doing their beers, wines and spirits, so it's not a major concern, but a lot of people out there when they're trying to create perfection, they'll actually buy bottled water, or they'll get spring water, or they know somebody who's in a particularly good area for water, and they'll go and get the water from there. So now I'm just going to mix up this malt, give it a good stir, and then I'm going to top up with more water. So I'm making sure that there's nothing stuck on the bottom of the bucket. That's it. Right, we've got that nicely dissolved in, and we're going to top up with some more water. This time it's going to be a mixture of hot and cold, because I'm looking for a liquid temperature in there of between 20 and 25. So I will keep going. So at this point we're up to around 20. I think it's well worth just checking the temperature. If you're new to it and you're not great on temperatures, what I would strongly recommend is about every 5 or 10 litres of liquid you do, give it a stir and then check the temperature. We're looking for between 20 and 25 on the thermometer. Okay, so at this moment in time I'm 22. I have to say that is absolutely perfect for what I'm looking for, and I'm going to add some more liquid to it just to bring it up to the 23. So once I'm up to the 23, then I can give it a good stir and we're ready to go. See, up to the 23 now, perfect. So I've got my paddle, I'm just going to give it a good stir now, make sure all the water is evenly dissolved. Right, so just giving it a good stir, I'm just going to check the thermometer. Yeah, we're still around the 22, so that's great. We've done our mix, and now what we need to do is we need to add some yeast to it. What I'd also like to do at this stage is to do a hydrometer reading. Now, the hydrometer reading, well, I'll just hold on that, on the yeast, while I do the hydrometer reading. The hydrometer measures the thickness of the liquid, the gravity of it. The thicker the liquid, the higher this is going to read, i.e. the more it's going to stick out of the liquid. As the yeast converts the sugar to alcohol, alcohol is thinner than water. This is going to drop in further and further and further. When it stops dropping and it's at a certain point, we will then know that fermentation's finished. We've got some excellent guides on the website on hydrometer usage, so have a look at those. I'm just going to pop that in though, because we're looking for a start gravity on this one around the 1040. And that is exactly what we've got. Now, if it's your first time and you're not well used to it, in fact it's good to do it every time, give this another stir and drop that hydrometer in again. And if you've got the same reading, you know you've mixed all your goodness in there. It's all got nicely dissolved. If it keeps changing, then keep mixing it until you get the same reading twice. Once you've got the same reading, we then want to make a note of that and we put that on top of our bucket. But before we do that, I've got the yeast. I'm going to add the yeast to it. And with the yeast, again, I'm just going to stir that in with my paddle. Just want to make sure all the yeast is nice and wet. In she goes. We're now going to put the lid on with the airlock. As you can see, the airlock I've half filled with water. So that's going. The little cap that's on it, well, sometimes you might not get that. With the cap on it, that will just stop the water squirting all over the place. So what we're looking for with the fermentation is a bubbling. So I'm just going to press this to try and show you what's happening. The bubble's coming through here. You can probably just hear it. It's like a plop, 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 plop. What we're looking for is a nice constant. Something not too vicious, not too vigorous. If it's vigorous, you've probably got it far too hot. So we're looking now to place our bucket in a room temperature between 20 and 25. And after 5 days, I'm going to be coming back to it to add some hops to it. So I will see you in 5 days. So day five for the bitters, Day 8 and day 10 for the other types. So look at your instructions as to when it is. Day 5, we're going to take the hops in this bag. Now the hops, you've got two types. You've got leaf and you've got pellet. And it depends what we can get hold of. So don't hold us to either. It really does depend. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to put these into a jug. I've now got some boiling water that I'm going to pour over the top. And I'm then going to, with my knife, just make sure they're all broken up. Yes, we're trying to just make sure everything's good here. If it's leaf, obviously it's a lot harder to do than if it's pellet. And all we're going to do now is we're just going to pour away a lot of that liquid so that we're left just with the mushy bit. Probably through a sieve is good if you want to use a sieve. And I've now got, as you can see, loads of pellets in there. And all I'm going to do is add those directly to the container. And I'm going to give it a good stir as well. Now that's going to put the most lovely hoppy taste in the beer. This particular one, this is the Uncle Teddy's, and we use Fuggles on this one. So we're now going to leave this for another period of time with the lid on in a fermenting area. Right, so we've added the hops, 5 days in the bucket, the hops. So with this particular one, this is the bitter, it's going to be 5 days before we add the hops, plus 5 days with the hops in, making 10 days from start to finish. Obviously the lagers and the other ones, they're slightly different, so look at your timings on the instructions. Okay.